She inherited a frozen cabin in the middle of nowhere, abandoned for decades, worth less than the snow it was buried under. But when the floorboards cracked beneath her feet, what she found hidden in the darkness below would turn her world upside down, put her life in danger, and prove that sometimes the greatest fortunes are guarded by the coldest secrets. Before we explore this story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped between past due notices and credit card offers like it belonged there. Margot Hayes almost threw it away without reading it. She was running late for her shift at the diner. Her 7-year-old daughter Riley was still in pajamas, and the coffee maker had died again, sputtering its last breath into a half-filled mug that tasted like burnt regret. But something about the envelope made her pause. Heavy cream paper, the kind people don't use anymore. Her name, written in fountain pen, each letter carefully formed. No return address, just a postmark from northern Montana, a place called Frost Ridge. She didn't know anyone in Montana, didn't know anyone who used fountain pens either. "Mama, I can't find my backpack," Riley called from the bedroom, her voice muffled by the thin walls of their apartment. "Check under your bed, baby," Margot called back, sliding her finger under the envelope's seal. The paper inside was just as formal, just as strange. It was from a law firm, Brennan and Associates. She scanned the words quickly, then read them again more slowly, then one more time, because they couldn't possibly mean what she thought they meant. "Dear Miss Hayes, it is our duty to inform you that you have been named as the sole beneficiary in the last will and testament of Adelaide Morgan, deceased on November 3rd. The estate consists of a single property, a residential cabin located on 17 acres in Frost Ridge, Montana. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss the transfer of deed and property settlement." Margot sat down at the kitchen table, the letter trembling in her hands. Adelaide Morgan, the name echoed in her memory, like something from a half-remembered dream. Then it clicked. Her grandmother's sister. The great-aunt no one ever talked about. The one who'd left the family before Margot was born. The one her mother had mentioned maybe twice in 30 years. Always with a strange tightness in her voice. The black sheep, her mother had called her once. The one who chose mountains over family. "I found it." Riley emerged triumphantly, backpack in hand, then stopped when she saw her mother's face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, baby." Margot folded the letter quickly. "Nothing's wrong. We might be taking a trip soon." Riley's eyes lit up. "Really? Where?" "Somewhere cold," Margot said, her mind already racing. "Somewhere very, very cold." That night, after Riley had gone to sleep in the bedroom they shared, Margot sat at the kitchen table with her laptop and a glass of cheap wine. The glow from the screen illuminated her tired face, the dark circles under her eyes, the worry lines that had deepened over the past 3 years since Riley's father had walked out. She typed Frost Ridge, Montana into the search bar. The results were sparse. A town of fewer than 200 people, nestled in the mountains, 3 hours from the nearest city. The kind of place that barely showed up on maps. She found a few photos, snow-covered streets, wooden buildings that looked like they belonged in a different century, mountains rising like frozen giants in every direction, beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. She pulled up her bank account next. $743. Rent was $1,200, due in 9 days. The diner where she worked had cut her shifts from 5 days to 3. They were bringing in younger waitresses, prettier ones, who didn't have bags under their eyes and calluses on their hands from years of carrying heavy trays. She'd been looking for second jobs, but childcare cost more than she could make at minimum wage. Margot refilled her wine glass and stared at the letter. A cabin, 17 acres, middle of nowhere. The lawyer, a man named Thomas Brennan, who'd sounded about 100 years old on the phone, had been blunt. "The property's worth maybe 15 to 20,000, he'd said. "Land value only. The cabin itself, well, It hasn't been occupied in over 30 years. No electricity, no running water, no road maintenance. You'd be lucky to get $5,000 for it as is. $5,000. It wasn't much, but it was more than she had. It could cover rent for 4 months, while she found better work. It could fix her car, which made a noise like a dying animal every time she started it. It could buy Riley new shoes, a winter coat that actually fit, maybe even a birthday party with her school friends, instead of just cupcakes at home. But something made her hesitate. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was exhaustion making her sentimental. Or maybe it was the way her mother had said that name years ago, Adelaide, with something in her voice that wasn't quite anger, wasn't quite sadness, something more like fear. 3 days later, Margot called the lawyer back. "I want to see it first," she said, "before I decide to sell." There was a pause on the line. "Miss Hayes, I don't recommend making the trip, especially not in winter. The roads up there, they're not maintained, and the cabin, it's not habitable." "I understand," Margot said, "but I need to see it. It was left to me." "That means something." Another pause, longer this time. Then Thomas Brennan sighed. "All right, I'll have the keys sent to you, but be careful. That part of Montana, it's not like the rest of the world. Things happen differently up there." "What kind of things?" Margot asked. But the lawyer had already hung up. The keys arrived 2 days later, in another cream-colored envelope. 3 of them, old brass, the kind that looked like they belonged in a fairy tale. And with them, a hand-drawn map, because GPS doesn't work once you get into the mountains. The lawyer had written in spidery handwriting, "Follow the main road to mile marker 37. Then turn west on the logging road. 3 miles in, you'll see a stone marker. The cabin is another half-mile past that." Margot stared at the map for a long time. Then she packed. The drive took 2 days. They left on a Friday morning, Riley bundled in the back seat with her tablet and a bag of snacks, chattering excitedly about their adventure. Margot had told her they were going to see their new cabin, a place in the mountains where the air was clean and the sky was big. She hadn't mentioned they might be living there. Hadn't mentioned the eviction notice she'd found taped to their door yesterday. Hadn't mentioned that this might not be an adventure, but a last resort. They drove through Oregon into Idaho, the landscape gradually transforming from green valleys to snow-dusted plains. Riley watched movies on her tablet until the battery died, then pressed her face against the window, marveling at the endless white. "Mama, look, it's like we're driving into a snow globe." Margot smiled despite the knot in her stomach. "Yeah, baby, just like that." They spent the night in a cheap motel outside of Missoula, sharing a lumpy bed and eating gas station sandwiches for dinner. Riley fell asleep quickly, her small body curled against Margot's side. Margot lay awake, listening to the trucks rumbling past on the highway, wondering what the hell she was doing. Running toward an abandoned cabin in the middle of winter, with a 7-year-old and less than $500 left after gas in the motel. Her mother would have called her crazy. Her mother, who died 3 years ago from cancer, who'd never mentioned Adelaide Morgan except those 2 times, who'd taken whatever secrets the family had straight to her grave. The next morning, they drove north into Montana. The landscape grew harsher with every mile. The mountains rose higher, darker, their peaks lost in clouds. The trees pressed closer to the road, thick pines heavy with snow. Traffic thinned until they were the only car on the highway, a lone speck moving through an endless white wilderness. They stopped for gas in a town called Silver Creek. Population 312, according to the faded sign. The gas station was attached to a general store, the kind of place that sold everything from motor oil to canned peaches. An old man sat behind the register, his face weathered like ancient leather. "You folks passing through?" he asked, as Margot paid for gas and a bag of beef jerky. "Heading to Frost Ridge," Margot said. The man's expression shifted, something flickering in his eyes. Frost Ridge, he repeated. Not many people go up that way, especially not in winter. I inherited some property, Margot explained. Just going to check it out. The old man nodded slowly. What property? The Morgan place. Margot froze. How did you know? Only one inheritance up that way in the last 30 years, he said. Adelaide Morgan's cabin. You related to her? She was my great-aunt. The man studied her for a long moment, then reached under the counter and pulled out a box of matches. On the house, he said. You'll need these. The cabin's got no power. And, miss? He leaned forward, his voice dropping. If you find anything strange up there, anything at all, you come back down here and you tell Sheriff Dawson. Don't try to handle it yourself. Understand? Margot took the matches, her hands suddenly cold. What kind of strange? But the old man had already turned away, his attention fixed on rearranging cigarette cartons like their conversation had never happened. The road to Frost Ridge climbed steadily into the mountains. The pavement gave way to gravel, then to hard-packed snow. Riley had gone quiet in the morning back seat, her earlier excitement replaced by unease. The trees pressed close on both sides now, their branches forming a tunnel overhead, blocking out most of the pale winter sun. It felt less like driving and more like descending into something, some place where the normal rules didn't quite apply. Mile marker 37 appeared like a ghost through the snow. Margot almost missed it. She turned onto the logging road, and immediately the truck began to struggle. The snow was deeper here, untouched except for animal tracks. The trees grew so thick she couldn't see more than 20 feet in any direction. Every bump and rut jarred through the vehicle, making Riley grip her seatbelt. Then she saw it. The stone marker, just like the map showed. A weathered granite pillar about 4 feet tall, half buried in a snowdrift. No words, no signs, just stone. Margot turned onto what she hoped was a driveway and drove another half-mile, her heart pounding, her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The cabin appeared suddenly through the trees, and Margot's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't what she'd expected. The lawyer had made it sound like a shack, a falling-down ruin, barely worth the lumber. But this was substantial. 2 stories of dark logs, a wide porch, windows that reflected the gray sky like mirrors, snow piled high on the roof, icicles hanging from the eaves like teeth, beautiful in a haunting, forgotten way. Is that it? Riley pressed her face against the window. That's really ours? Apparently, Margot muttered, killing the engine. The silence that followed was absolute. No traffic sounds, no voices, no hum of electricity, just the whisper of wind through the pines and the distant cry of a bird. Come on, Margot said, forcing brightness into her voice. Let's see what we've got. The cold hit her like a physical force the moment she opened the door. Montana winter wasn't like Oregon winter. This cold had weight, substance. It bit through her jacket, her jeans, straight to her bones. Riley, bundled in her puffy coat and pink mittens, looked like a small astronaut preparing to explore an alien planet. They trudged through snow that came up to Riley's knees, following what might have been a path toward the cabin's front porch. The steps groaned under their weight, but held firm. Margot fumbled with the keys, her fingers already numb. The first key didn't fit. The second did, sliding into the lock smoothly, too smoothly, like someone had used it recently. The door swung inward with a sound like a sigh, and they stepped into darkness. The air inside was cold, but not frozen. Stale and dry, like the inside of a closet that hadn't been opened in years. Margot pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating a single large room. Stone fireplace, dominating one wall, its hearth still full of old ash. A kitchen area with a hand-pump sink and an antique wood stove. A heavy wooden table with 2 chairs. A rocking chair in the corner. Everything covered in dust, but not the thick, choking layer she'd expected. More like the cabin had been abandoned months ago, not decades. "It smells funny," Riley whispered, clinging to her mother's arm. It did smell strange, not musty or moldy, but cold and dry, like winter itself had been sealed inside. Margot moved deeper into the cabin, her phone light sweeping across the walls. They were bare, except for a few iron hooks and a small shelf holding 3 mason jars, empty and spotlessly clean. A narrow staircase led up to what must be a loft. A door on the far wall probably opened to a bedroom or storage, but what drew Margot's attention was the floor. Wide plank floorboards, beautiful dark wood that must have cost a fortune. Except in one spot, near the center of the room, 3 boards looked different, newer. The color didn't quite match the others, and the grain ran in a slightly different direction. "Can we make a fire?" Riley asked, her teeth chattering. "Yeah, baby. Let me check the chimney first." Margot moved to the fireplace, but her eyes kept drifting back to those mismatched boards. She knelt by the hearth and looked up into the flue. Cold air rushed down, which meant it was clear. She grabbed some of the old newspaper stacked beside the fireplace, the pages yellowed and brittle, dated from 1992, 33 years ago. While Margot built a fire using the matches from the gas station and some kindling she found in a wooden box, Riley explored. She climbed the stairs to the loft, her footsteps echoing overhead. "It's a bedroom up here," she called down. "There's a bed and everything. It's really dusty, though." "Don't touch anything," Margot called back. "We don't know what condition things are in." The fire caught quickly, flames licking up the newspaper and igniting the kindling. Margot added larger pieces of wood from the stack beside the fireplace, and soon warmth began to spread through the room. It felt good, almost too good, like the cabin had been waiting for them, ready to come alive again. Margot stood and walked to the mismatched floorboards. She knelt and ran her fingers along the seam. They were definitely newer than the rest. Someone had replaced them, maybe 10 or 15 years ago based on the color. But why? She pressed down on one. It gave slightly, almost springy. She pressed harder and heard a faint creak. "Mama, look what I found." Riley came down the stairs holding something. A photograph in a tarnished silver frame. Margot took it, angling it toward the firelight. The photo showed a woman, maybe 50 or 60 years old, standing in front of this very cabin. She had Margot's same dark hair, same angular face. Her eyes held something fierce, something uncompromising. "Adelaide," Margot whispered. "Has to be. She's pretty," Riley said. "Is she the one who gave us this place?" "Yeah, baby. She was my mother's aunt. My great-aunt. Why didn't we ever meet her?" Margot looked at the photograph, at those fierce eyes. "I don't know," she admitted. "Nobody ever talked about her." They spent the rest of the afternoon making the cabin livable. Margot found sheets in a cedar chest, surprisingly clean and smelling of lavender. She made up the bed in the loft for Riley and claimed the rocking chair for herself, pulling it close to the fire. They ate granola bars and apples for dinner, washing them down with water. Margot had brought in gallon jugs. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped. Even with the fire roaring, cold seeped in around the windows and through gaps in the logs. Margot added more wood, watching the flames dance, trying not to think about how little money they had left, how isolated they were, how crazy this all was. Riley fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the journey. Margot tucked her in, then descended the stairs and stood in front of the fire. The cabin creaked and settled around her, old wood adjusting to the heat. Outside, wind moaned through the pines. She thought about the old man at the gas station. If you find anything strange, anything at all. Her eyes drifted back to those mismatched floorboards. In the firelight, they almost seemed to glow. Margot walked over and knelt beside them again. This time, she pulled out her phone and examined the seam more closely. There were small gaps between the boards, big enough to slip her fingernails into. She worked her fingers into one gap and pulled. Nothing. She tried the next board. Still nothing. The third board shifted. Margot froze, her heart suddenly pounding. She pulled harder, and the board lifted slightly, with a creak that seemed impossibly loud in the silent cabin. She glanced up at the loft. Riley didn't stir. Margot set the board aside and shone her phone light into the gap. Darkness. And something else. She could see the edge of something pale. Something that didn't belong in the dusty crawl space under old floorboards. She pried up the second board, then the third, setting them carefully aside. Her hands were shaking now, though she wasn't sure if it was from cold or adrenaline. The phone light revealed a space about 3 feet deep, carved out of the earth and lined with what looked like cedar boards, and in that space, stacked neatly, were boxes. Metal boxes, the kind you'd use for documents or valuables. 6 of them, each about the size of a shoebox. Margot's breath came fast and shallow. She reached down and lifted one box. It was heavy, much heavier than it should be. The metal was cold, but not rusted. A small padlock held it shut. She tried the third key from the lawyer's envelope, the one she hadn't used yet. The lock clicked open. Inside, wrapped in plastic, were bundles of cash, $100 bills, stacked and bound with paper bands. Margot's hands trembled as she lifted one bundle. The band was printed with $10,000. She counted the bundles in the box. 20 of them. $200,000 in one box. She set it down carefully and stared at the other 5 boxes. They were identical. 6 boxes. $200,000 each. $1,200,000. Hidden beneath the floorboards of an abandoned cabin. Margot sat back on her heels, her mind reeling. This wasn't possible. This didn't happen to people like her. What had Adelaide been involved in? Where had this money come from? And why had she left it here, hidden, for 30 years? A sound from outside made her jump. Footsteps crunching through snow. Slow, deliberate. Coming closer. Margot's blood turned to ice. She shoved the box back into the hole and replaced the floorboards as quickly and quietly as she could. The footsteps stopped at the porch steps. She grabbed a poker from beside the fireplace and moved to the wall beside the door, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. A knock. 3 slow, heavy knocks that seemed to shake the entire cabin. Margot waited, poker raised, breath held. Another knock. Then a voice. Male. Rough. I know you're in there. I saw the smoke. Margot said nothing. I'm not here to hurt you, the voice continued. I'm a neighbor. Thought I'd check on whoever was fool enough to come up here in winter. Margot's grip on the poker didn't loosen. Go away. I've got a gun. A low chuckle. No, you don't. But that's all right. I'm leaving. Just wanted you to know. You're not as alone up here as you think. If you need anything, I'm a mile east. Name's Jack. And miss? That cabin. It's got history. You might want to learn it before you decide to stay. The footsteps retreated, crunching away through the snow. Margot stayed frozen by the door for a long time, listening. When she finally moved to the window and looked out, she saw nothing but darkness and falling snow. But she felt it, the weight of being watched, of secrets pressing in from all sides. She looked at the replaced floorboards, at the photograph of Adelaide on the mantel, at her sleeping daughter in the loft. Above, $1,200,000, hidden for 3 decades, left to her by a woman no one would talk about. What the hell had she walked into? Margot didn't sleep that night. She sat in the rocking chair, poker across her lap, watching the door and listening to every creak, every whisper of wind, every sound the old cabin made. The fire burned low, then lower, until she had to add more wood just to keep the cold from creeping back in. Riley slept peacefully in the loft above, unaware that her mother had just discovered over $1 million hidden beneath the floorboards, unaware that someone named Jack knew they were here, unaware that everything had changed. As dawn broke gray and cold through the windows, Margot finally allowed herself to look at those three mismatched boards again. In the pale morning light, they seemed to mock her, daring her to ignore what she'd found. But she couldn't. Not now. Not when $1,200,000 sat 5 feet below her daughter's sleeping form. She waited until Riley woke up, made her breakfast from their dwindling supplies, oatmeal cooked on the wood stove and topped with brown sugar. Then she sent her back upstairs with coloring books and her tablet, now plugged into the portable battery pack. "Mama needs to do some work down here, baby. You stay up there and play for a bit. Okay?" "Okay, Mama." Riley's voice floated down, already distracted by her crayons. Margot moved to the mismatched boards and lifted them again, her hands steadier this time. The 6 metal boxes sat there in their cedar-lined hole, patient and waiting. She pulled them all out one by one, setting them on the floor beside the fireplace. Each one opened with the same key. Each one held the same thing: bundles of $100 bills wrapped in plastic, 20 bundles per box, $10,000 per bundle. She sat surrounded by $1,200,000 and tried to breathe. Where had Adelaide gotten this money? The bills looked old but not ancient, mostly from the 1980s and 90s based on the design. Drug money, stolen money, or something else entirely. Margot picked up one bundle and examined it closely. The bills felt real, looked real. She held one up to the light filtering through the window. The security strip was there, the watermark. These weren't counterfeit. This was real money, and someone had hidden it here for 3 decades. But something nagged at her. The hole wasn't that big, maybe 3 feet by 3 feet. She looked at the rest of the floor, at the beautiful dark planks stretching across the entire cabin. Then she started tapping. She moved systematically, tapping each board with her knuckles, listening for changes in sound. Most boards gave a solid thunk, but near the kitchen area, 3 boards sounded hollow. Her heart began to race again. She examined them closely. They looked like all the others. Same age, same wear. But when she pressed down on the pinned center one, it gave slightly. She worked her fingers into the seam and pulled. The board came up easily, as if it had been designed to. Below was another cedar-lined compartment, this one slightly larger, and it too held metal boxes. She counted them. 12 boxes this time. Margot's hands shook as she opened the first one. Same setup. 20 bundles, $10,000 each, $200,000 per box. 12 boxes meant $2,400,000. She sat back on her heels, breathing hard. Combined with the first cash, that was $3,600,000. The cabin suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in. This wasn't an inheritance. This was something else entirely. Something dangerous. She thought about the old man at the gas station. His warning. If you find anything strange. She thought about Jack's voice in the darkness. That cabin's got history. Mama? Riley's voice drifted down. Can I come down now? I'm bored. Not yet, baby. Margot called back, her voice cracking. Just a little longer. She had to keep looking. She tapped her way across the entire floor and found 4 more hollow spots. Each one held more boxes. By the time she finished, she had pulled up 27 metal boxes total. She did the math 3 times because she couldn't believe it. Each box held $200,000. 27 boxes meant $5,400,000 hidden under the floorboards of this cabin. But she wasn't done. Something told her to keep looking. She moved to the walls, tapping, listening. The back wall near the bedroom door sounded different. She ran her hands along the logs until she found it, a seam so fine it was almost invisible. She pressed, and a panel swung inward. Behind it was a space about 2 feet deep, and in that space were more boxes, larger ones this time, file box size. She counted 30 of them. Her hands trembled so badly she could barely open the first one. Inside were bundles of bills, but these were different. Stacks of $500 and $1,000 bills, denominations she'd only ever heard about. The bands on these bundles read $50,000. She counted the bundles in the box, 20 of them. $1 million per box, 30 boxes, $30 million hidden in the wall. Margot backed away from the open panel, her legs suddenly weak. She sat down hard on the floor, her mind unable to process what she was seeing. $5,400,000 in the floor, $30 million in the wall, $35,400,000 total. But there was more. The bedroom. She hadn't checked the bedroom yet. She stood on shaking legs and opened the door she'd been too tired to explore yesterday. The room was small, just big enough for a bed frame and a dresser. The bed frame was empty, just bare slats. But the dresser looked solid, heavy. She pulled out the drawers. Empty. Then she noticed the back of the dresser didn't sit flush with the wall. She pulled it away and found another hidden panel. Behind this one was a steel door, the kind you'd see on a safe. It had a combination lock. Margot stared at it, her mind racing. She tried Adelaide's birth year, which she'd seen on the legal documents. 1937. The lock didn't budge. She tried the year Adelaide had supposedly left the family. 1976. Nothing. Then, she tried the year on those newspapers by the fireplace. 1992. The lock clicked. The steel door swung open with a whisper. Inside was a vault, about 6 feet deep and 4 feet wide, and it was filled floor to ceiling with metal boxes, not the small ones from the floor or the medium ones from the wall. These were larger, secure transport cases, the kind banks use. She counted them. 45 cases, stacked carefully. Margot pulled one out. It took all her strength. The case must have weighed 60 or 70 pounds. She set it down and opened the latches. Inside, protected by foam padding, were bricks of cash, shrink-wrapped bricks, each one labeled. Each brick held $100,000. She counted the bricks in the case, 50 of them. $5 million per case. 45 cases, $225 million in the vault, combined with everything else. That meant this cabin held $260,400,000 in cash. Margot sat on the bedroom floor and started laughing. Not happy laughter, but the kind that comes when your mind can't process reality anymore. $260 million, hidden by her great-aunt Adelaide in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, left to her a broke single mother barely surviving. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But it was. Every dollar of it was real, sitting in boxes and cases all around her, a fortune that would take several lifetimes to spend. Questions pounded through her head like drums. Where did Adelaide get this money? Why did she hide it? Who else knew it was here? And most importantly, what the hell was Margot supposed to do with it? She heard Riley's footsteps on the stairs. "Mama, I'm hungry. Are we having lunch?" Margot quickly closed the steel vault door and pushed the dresser back into place. "Yeah, baby. Let's make lunch." She walked back into the main room on legs that didn't quite feel like her own. Everything looked the same. The fire burning low in the hearth, the rocking chair by the window, the replaced floorboards. But nothing was the same. Nothing would ever be the same again. She made Riley peanut butter sandwiches with the last of their bread, her hands moving on autopilot while her mind spun. After Riley ate, Margot sent her back upstairs with a promise they'd go outside and play in the snow later. Then, she sat at the heavy wooden table and tried to think. The smart thing would be to call the police, report the money, let them handle it. But something stopped her. The way the old man at the gas station had looked at her. The way Jack had appeared in the darkness with his warning. The fact that Adelaide had hidden this fortune for over 30 years without anyone finding it. If she called the police, questions would come. Investigations. The IRS. And what if the money was stolen? What if reporting it meant losing Riley because her mother was connected to some crime she knew nothing about? She needed information. She needed to understand what Adelaide had been involved in. Margot pulled out her phone and checked the signal. 1 bar. Barely enough. She opened a browser and typed Adelaide Morgan Frost, Ridge, Montana. The first few results were genealogy sites, birth and death records. Adelaide Rose Morgan, born March 14, 1937, died November 3, 2024. Never married, no children, lived in Frost Ridge, Montana, from 1976 until her death. Before that, the records got fuzzy. Adelaide had lived in Seattle, worked as Margot, squinted at the screen, an accountant. She dug deeper, searching for news articles, anything that might explain a fortune hidden in a cabin. Most results were dead ends. Then she found something, a small article from the Seattle Times, dated April 1976. Local woman questioned in missing funds case. The article was brief. Adelaide Morgan, an accountant for Cascadia Holdings, had been questioned regarding $40 million in missing client funds. No charges had been filed. The case had been closed due to lack of evidence. $40 million. Missing. 1976. The same year, Adelaide had left Seattle and moved to Frost Ridge. Margot's stomach clenched. She searched for more about Cascadia Holdings and found something that made her blood run cold. Cascadia Holdings had been a front company for organized crime, shut down by the FBI in 1978. The people who'd run it, the article said, had connections to money laundering, extortion, and murder. Several had gone to prison. Others had simply disappeared. What happens next will shake this isolated cabin to its core, reveal secrets that powerful people buried decades ago, and remind us why some fortunes carry a price no one should have to pay. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Margot set down her phone, her hands trembling. Adelaide had worked for criminals. She'd somehow taken $40 million, maybe more, and vanished into the Montana wilderness. She'd hidden the money, lived quietly for nearly 50 years, and died without ever touching it. And now that fortune belonged to Margot. But if Adelaide had stolen from organized crime, if those people or their descendants were still out there, they'd come looking eventually. They'd want their money back. And they wouldn't care who got hurt in the process. The sound of an engine outside made Margot jump. She ran to the window and peered through the frosted glass. A black SUV was pulling up the driveway, moving slowly through the snow. It stopped near her truck. 2 men climbed out, both wearing dark coats and serious expressions. They weren't dressed like locals. They looked like businessmen or lawyers, or something worse. Margot's heart hammered. She ran to the loft stairs. "Riley, baby, I need you to hide." "What? Why?" "Just do it, please. Under the bed, right now, and don't come out until I tell you." "Mama, you're scaring me." "I know, baby. I know. But please, just trust me." She heard Riley scramble under the bed as the men reached the porch. The knock was polite, professional. 3 measured raps. Margot grabbed the poker again and moved to the door but didn't open it. "What do you want?" "Miss Hayes." A cultured voice. Smooth. "My name is Robert Chen. I'm an attorney representing certain interests regarding this property. I'd like to speak with you for a moment." "I'm not selling," Margot called back. "The property was left to me, legally." A pause. "I'm not here to contest the inheritance. I'm here to discuss what may or may not be located on the premises. Perhaps we could talk inside. It's quite cold." "Not a chance. Say what you need to say from there." Another pause, longer this time. "Very well. Miss Hayes, we have reason to believe this property contains certain assets that were, let's say, misappropriated many years ago, assets that legally belong to my clients. I'm authorized to offer you substantial compensation for their return. No questions asked." "How much we talking?" Margot asked, her mind racing. $500,000. Cash. Immediate transfer." more than generous for the return of something that isn't rightfully yours. And if I say no, then things become complicated, Robert Chen said, his voice losing some of its smoothness. My clients have been very patient for a very long time. But patience has limits. You threatening me? Not at all. Simply stating facts. You're alone up here, Miss Hayes. Isolated. These mountains can be dangerous, especially in winter. Accidents happen. Get off my property, Margot said, trying to keep her voice steady. Or I call the sheriff. A low chuckle. Please do. I'm sure Sheriff Dawson would be very interested to hear about any large sums of cash you might have discovered. The IRS tends to ask uncomfortable questions about unreported income. Margot said nothing. They know, she realized. They know exactly what's in this cabin. Have you considered your daughter's welfare? Robert Chen continued. Riley, isn't it? 7 years old. Such a vulnerable age. Raising a child alone in such a remote location. So many things could go wrong. White-hot rage flooded through Margot. You stay away from my daughter. 24 hours, Miss Hayes. That's how long you have to make the smart choice. We'll return tomorrow at noon. Have the assets ready for transfer, and everyone walks away happy. Refuse, and, well, we'll have to explore other options. Footsteps retreated. Doors slammed. The engine started, and the SUV pulled away, its tire tracks cutting deep lines through the pristine snow. Margot stood frozen, the poker still gripped in her white-knuckled hands. They knew. They'd been watching, waiting. Probably since Adelaide died. Probably since the moment the inheritance paperwork had been filed. And now they wanted their money back. $500,000. They were offering $500,000 for over $260 million, which meant they had no idea exactly how much was here. They just knew it was something. And they'd threatened Riley. Actually, threatened her baby girl. She replaced the poker by the fireplace and climbed the stairs to the loft. Riley, you can come out now. Riley crawled from under the bed, her face streaked with tears. Who were those men? Mama, I'm scared. Margot pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. I know, baby. Me too. Are we in trouble? We might be, Margot admitted. But we're going to be okay. I promise. What did they want? Something that doesn't belong to them. Margot sat on the edge of the bed, Riley in her lap. Listen to me, Riley. I need you to be very brave right now. Can you do that? Riley nodded against her mother's chest. We found something in this cabin. Something valuable. Something that belonged to Adelaide. And there are people who think it belongs to them. Bad people? Riley whispered. Maybe. Probably. Are we going to give it to them? Margot was quiet for a long moment. No, she said finally. No, we're not. Because your great-aunt Adelaide hid that something for a reason. She kept it safe for almost 50 years, and she left it to us, to me, which means she wanted us to have it. She trusted us with it. But Mama, if they're dangerous, then we need to be smart, Margot said. Smarter than them. And braver. She pulled back and looked at her daughter's frightened face. You know how I always tell you we're survivors. That we can handle anything, as long as we're together. Riley nodded. This is one of those times. We're going to figure this out. But I need you to trust me and do exactly what I say. Okay? Okay, Riley whispered. Margot carried her downstairs and made hot chocolate on the wood stove, using the last of their cocoa mix. While Riley drank it, curled up in a blanket by the fire, Margot thought hard. She had 24 hours. 24 hours to decide what to do with a fortune that people were willing to kill for. She couldn't run. Her truck barely made it up here in the first place. The roads were probably worse now with fresh snow. And where would she go? She had no money except what was hidden in this cabin, and she couldn't exactly waltz into a bank with $260 million in cash. She couldn't stay either. Even if she refused their offer, they'd come back. They'd take the money by force. Or worse, she needed help. But who? The local sheriff might be compromised, might already know about the money. The FBI. They'd confiscate everything, investigate her, possibly charge her with something. She'd lose Riley. Jack, the neighbor who'd shown up last night. He'd warned her the cabin had history. He knew something. And he was close. A mile east, he'd said. Margot made her decision. She bundled Riley in her coat and boots. "Where are we going?" Riley asked. "To meet a neighbor, someone who might be able to help us." They stepped out into the cold afternoon. Snow had started falling again, thick flakes that muffled sound and turned the world into a blur of white and gray. Margot locked the cabin door behind them, though she doubted a lock would stop anyone who really wanted to get in. She carried Riley part of the way, following a path that seemed to lead east through the trees. After about 15 minutes, she saw smoke rising above the pines. A cabin, smaller than Adelaide's, appeared through the snow. Smoke curled from a stone chimney. A battered pickup truck sat in front. As they approached, the door opened. A man stepped out, maybe 60 years old, grizzled gray beard, wearing a flannel shirt and jeans. He held a rifle loosely in one hand, but didn't point it at them. "Figured you'd come," he said. "Name's Jack Morrison. Come on in before you freeze." Jack Morrison's cabin smelled like coffee and wood smoke. It was smaller than Adelaide's place, but warmer somehow. Lived in. Worn furniture, shelves lined with books, a cast iron stove radiating heat. He set the rifle by the door and gestured to a couch covered with a Navajo blanket. "Sit. I'll make the kid some cocoa." Riley clung to Margot's side, eyeing Jack warily. "It's okay, baby," Margot whispered, but her own heart was pounding. She didn't know this man, didn't know if she could trust him, but she was out of options. Jack returned with 2 mugs of coffee and one of cocoa, the real kind, not powdered. He settled into a chair across from them and studied Margot with eyes that had seen too much. "So, you found it." "Found what?" Margot asked carefully. "Don't play games. Adelaide's fortune. The money she spent half a century protecting." Jack took a sip of coffee. "Heard Chen and his boys showed up. That means they know you've found it. Means you're in trouble. How do you know about any of this?" Jack leaned back. "I'm the only person Adelaide trusted in 48 years. I moved up here in 2006. She was my neighbor, same as she's yours now. Took her 3 years before she spoke more than 10 words to me. Another 2 before she told me her story." "What story?" Margot demanded. "Who was she? What's this money? That's a long tale." Jack glanced at Riley, who was sipping her cocoa quietly. "Maybe the little one should play in the other room. Got some toys in there from when my grandkids visit." Riley looked to her mother. Margot nodded. "It's okay. Stay where I can see you, though." Riley wandered to the doorway of the next room, where she could see shelves of wooden toys and puzzles. Jack waited until she was occupied, then turned back to Margot. "Adelaide Rose Morgan. Born in Seattle, 1937. Smart as hell. Got her accounting degree when women weren't supposed to do that kind of thing. Started working for a firm called Cascadia Holdings in 1968. I found something about that online," Margot said. "They were criminals." Jack nodded. But Adelaide didn't know that at first. They hired her to cook the books, make dirty money, look clean. By the time she figured out what they really were, she was in too deep. They had leverage on her, threatened her family. So she kept working for them, moving money, hiding it, making it untraceable. And then she stole from them. Not exactly. Jack set down his mug. In 1975, the FBI started closing in on Cascadia. Adelaide knew the whole operation was about to collapse. The bosses, men like Victor Castellano and Thomas Renfield, they started liquidating assets, converting everything to cash. They planned to disappear, leave the country, let their lower-level guys take the fall. Adelaide was ordered to process the conversion. Over the course of 6 months, she moved roughly $300 million through various accounts, converting it all to cash. Small bills, nothing traceable. The plan was to store it in a warehouse until the heat died down. But Adelaide knew something they didn't. She knew the FBI had already infiltrated their organization, knew everyone was going to prison, and that money would disappear into evidence vaults, then get lost in the system. Crooked cops, corrupt feds. It happens. So, she took it, most of it. Jack smiled grimly. Adelaide was smarter than all of them combined. While everyone was scrambling and panicking, she calmly rerouted the money, moved it in pieces, made it vanish. When the FBI finally raided Cascadia in April of '76, they found maybe 20 million in cash. The rest was gone. And so was Adelaide. Margot's throat was dry. They must have hunted her. Oh, they tried. Jack stood and walked to the window, looking out at the snow. Victor Castellano went to prison, swearing he'd find her. Died there in 1998, still swearing. Thomas Renfield disappeared, probably killed by his own people for losing the money. For years, people searched, hired investigators, bounty hunters. But Adelaide had vanished completely, changed her name, changed everything, lived as a ghost. He turned back to Margot. She chose Frost Ridge, because it's at the end of the world. No major roads, no industry, nothing to draw attention. She bought land with the little bit of clean money she had, built that cabin with her own hands, and hid the fortune. Lived off a small amount each year, never enough to raise flags. Worked odd jobs in town, kept to herself, and waited. Waited for what? For everyone who knew about the money to die or forget. For time to make her safe. Jack's expression softened. She waited 48 years. Never touched more than. She needed to survive. And you know why? Margot shook her head. Because she believed that money was cursed. It was stolen from thieves who'd stolen it from others. Blood money, she called it. She couldn't give it back because there was no one legitimate to give it to. The original victims, people who'd been extorted and robbed, they were long gone. So, she kept it safe. Thought maybe someday it could do some good instead of evil. And she left it to me, Margot whispered. Why? Jack returned to his chair. Your family. Her sister's granddaughter. Adelaide kept tabs on you over the years, even though she never made contact. She knew you were struggling, knew you were raising Riley alone, working yourself to the bone, barely surviving. She thought you might be the one person who'd understand what it meant to have nothing and how dangerous it is to suddenly have everything. Margot felt tears burning her eyes. I don't know what to do with it. I don't even know how much is there. How much? Did you find? $260,400,000, Margot said. In cash. Jack let out a low whistle. That's more than I thought. She must have been very, very good at hiding it. Margot, listen to me carefully. The people who came today, Robert Chen and his associates, they're not just lawyers. They work for the Castellano family. Victor's grandson, Marcus, he runs their operations now. Mostly legitimate these days. Real estate, construction, but dirty underneath. They've been searching for this money for decades. When Adelaide died and the inheritance paperwork got filed, they knew. They've been watching, waiting for you to find it. The $500,000 they offered, it's an insult, Margot said bitterly. It's a test. They don't know how much is actually there. But if you take their offer, you prove you found something. Then they'll squeeze you for the rest. And if they think you're hiding the full amount, Jack's jaw tightened. They won't be gentle about getting the truth. They threatened Riley, Margot said, her voice shaking with rage. That man, Chen, he threatened my daughter, which means you're out of time. Jack stood abruptly. You've got until noon tomorrow. We need to move fast. Move what? What are we doing? Jack walked to a closet and pulled out a heavy coat, gloves, and boots. First, we're moving that money. Can't leave it in Adelaide's cabin. They'll come back with more men. Tear the place apart. Second, we're calling in backup. People I trust. And third, Jack met her eyes. We're going to give Marcus Castellano a choice. Take the original offer and leave you alone, or face consequences that'll make him wish he'd never heard of Frost Ridge. What kind of consequences? The kind that involve the FBI, the IRS, and every piece of documentation Adelaide kept on Cascadia Holdings and the Castellano family. Jack pulled out a metal box from under his bed. Adelaide didn't just take their money. She took their records, names, dates, accounts, crimes, everything. She gave me copies before she died. Insurance, she called it. Why didn't she use it before? Because going public would have meant admitting she took the money. She'd have gone to prison too. But you're innocent. You inherited a cabin, found something inside. You're protected. Especially if we do this right. Margot looked at Riley playing in the other room, then back at Jack. You'd help us? Risk yourself like that? Adelaide saved my life once, Jack said quietly. Literally saved it. 2011, I had a heart attack in my cabin. She found me, drove me down the mountain in a blizzard, stayed with me in the hospital for 3 days, even though she hated being around people. I owe her. And I don't like bullies threatening children. Margot felt something loosen in her chest. Okay, what do we do first? First, we move the money. Tonight. They'll be watching the cabin but not closely yet. They think they've got time. Jack grabbed a radio from the shelf. I've got friends. Good people. We'll need their help. Margot, how much does the money weigh? Would you guess? Hundreds of pounds. Maybe thousands. There's a vault. Cases. Boxes everywhere. Jack nodded thoughtfully. We'll need trucks. Multiple trips. He lifted the radio. This is Morrison. Need an all-hands. Emergency. My place. 1 hour. Within 45 minutes, 5 people arrived at Jack's cabin. An older woman named Sarah, who ran the general store in Silver Creek. A younger man named Tom, who worked search and rescue. A couple, Dale and Linda, who owned the only functioning ranch within 30 miles. And Sheriff Dawson himself, a gray-haired man with kind eyes and a weathered face. Sarah took one look at Margot and Riley and immediately went to the kitchen to start making food. Tom and Dale began organizing supplies. Rope, tarps, heavy-duty bags. Linda sat with Riley, distracting her with stories, and Sheriff Dawson settled across from Margot with a cup of coffee. Jack filled me in on the drive over, he said. I've known about Adelaide for 20 years. Figured out who she was, what she'd done. Never said a word to anyone. She wasn't hurting anybody, and the people she took from, well, they earned what they got. You knew she had the money? Margot asked. Suspected. Never confirmed. Adelaide kept her secrets close. But I knew the Castellano family had been sniffing around for years. We've kept them out of Frost Ridge. Made it clear they're not welcome. But this, threatening you, threatening a child, Dawson's expression hardened. That crosses a line. What can we do? Legally, not much. They haven't actually committed a crime yet. Just made threats. But if they come onto your property without permission, if they try to take something that's not theirs, that's different. He leaned forward. Here's what I propose. We move the money tonight. Get it somewhere safe. Tomorrow at noon when they show up, you tell them you haven't found anything. Play dumb. Make them think Adelaide's fortune is still hidden or doesn't exist. They won't believe that. Probably not. But it buys time. And while they're trying to figure out their next move, we're documenting everything. Jack's evidence, their threats, everything. We build a case. Then we go to the FBI field office in Helena, bypass local channels, and blow this wide open. Margot felt a flutter of hope. You think it'll work? I think Adelaide was brilliant. She stole dirty money from criminals and hid it for 50 years. The statute of limitations has long passed. She's dead, so she can't be prosecuted. You're an innocent heir who found hidden assets. With proper legal handling and full disclosure, you might actually get to keep most of it. Pay some taxes, sure, but keep it. Use it the way Adelaide wanted, to do good. And if the FBI takes it all, then at least Riley's safe, Dawson said firmly. At least you're alive. Money isn't worth your lives. Margot thought about that as the group prepared for the move. She thought about Adelaide, living in isolation for nearly half a century, guarding a fortune she never spent, waiting for the right person to inherit, not just the money, but the burden of deciding what to do with it. And Adelaide had chosen her, a struggling single mother who'd never had anything handed to her, someone who understood the value of $1 because she'd fought for every single one. By the time full darkness fell, they were ready. The group caravanned to Adelaide's cabin, 3 trucks, including Margot's. They worked in near silence, using headlamps and flashlights. Jack and Tom pulled up the floorboards, while Dale and Sheriff Dawson opened the wall panels and vault. Sarah and Linda packed the money carefully into heavy duffel bags and sealed cases, keeping careful count. The work took hours. Riley slept in Jack's truck, wrapped in blankets. Margot worked alongside the others, her hands moving mechanically while her mind spun. Every box they loaded, every bundle they counted, felt surreal. This was someone's life's work, someone's desperate gamble, someone's hope that the world could still be made right. Around 2 in the morning, Tom called out from the vault, "There's something else here. Not money. A box. Metal. Locked. Bring it," Jack said. "Margot might need whatever's inside." They finished loading just before 3. The cabin looked untouched. Jack had carefully replaced every floorboard, every panel. Unless someone knew exactly where to look, they'd never know the hiding places had been emptied. The caravan drove to an old barn on Dale and Linda's property, miles from any main road. They unloaded everything into a hidden cellar that Dale's grandfather had built during Prohibition. Once a hiding place for illegal liquor, now a vault for stolen fortune. Sarah kept tally. $260,400,000, she confirmed. All accounted for, plus whatever's in this box. She handed the locked metal box to Margot. It was about the size of a shoebox. Heavy. The same key that had opened the money boxes opened this one. Inside were letters, dozens of them, handwritten on yellowed paper, and a journal, leather-bound, its pages filled with Adelaide's careful script. Margot lifted the first letter. It was addressed to her. "Dear Margot," it began, "if you're reading this, then you found my secret. You found the burden I've carried for 48 years. I'm sorry to pass it to you, but I believe you're strong enough to carry it, smart enough to know what to do with it, and brave enough to face what comes next." Margot's hands trembled as she read. The letter explained everything: Adelaide's life, her choices, her regrets. "I stole this money not for myself, but because I couldn't bear to see it fund more evil. The men I worked for, they destroyed lives, families, children. They deserved to lose everything, but I couldn't give the money back. There was no one clean to give it to. So I hid it and waited for someone worthy to inherit not just the fortune, but the responsibility of using it right." The letter continued. "You'll face threats. People will come for this money. They'll lie, intimidate, maybe worse. But you have power they don't expect. You have the truth. You have records, and you have something they lost long ago: integrity. Use it. Protect Riley. And know that whatever you decide to do with this fortune, I trust your judgment. Your family. You're strong, and you deserve a chance at a life without struggle. With love, Adelaide." Margot wiped tears from her face. The others gave her space, moving away to give her privacy. She opened the journal and began to read, page after page of Adelaide's life in hiding, her loneliness, her fear, her determination, and near the end, entries about watching Margot from afar. October 19, 2022. Saw photos online of Margot at Riley's school event. She looks tired but happy. Riley is beautiful, strong like her mother. April 3, 2023. Margot lost another job. I wish I could help, but not yet. Not until I'm gone and the money can't trace back to me. Soon she'll have everything she needs. Adelaide had been watching over her for years, caring for her from a distance, making sure that when the time came, Margot would receive not just money, but a chance at transformation and protection. The records, the evidence, the insurance. Margot flipped through more pages, her flashlight illuminating Adelaide's careful handwriting. One entry from June of 2015 caught her eye. Today I saw a hummingbird at my window. It reminded me that even the smallest creatures can travel impossible distances if they're determined enough. Margot is like that hummingbird. She's struggled, been knocked down, but she keeps going. She works 2 jobs, raises Riley alone, and never complains. She's exactly who I was before Cascadia, before I learned that sometimes survival means making impossible choices. Another entry, dated March 2019. Margot's mother died today. My niece, the last connection to my sister. I wanted to go to the funeral, to comfort Margot, to tell her she's not alone, but I couldn't risk it. The Castellano family still has people watching. After all these years, they still search. If they traced me to Margot, they'd hurt her to get to me. So I stayed away, sent flowers anonymously, and I cried for the first time in 20 years. Margot's throat tightened. Adelaide had been there, in the shadows, caring when Margot had felt most alone. She read another passage from December 2023, just weeks before Adelaide's death. My heart is failing. Doctor says, I have maybe 3 months. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of leaving this burden unsolved. But then I think of Margot, and I know she's the answer I've been waiting for. She has Riley, a reason to fight. She has integrity, a compass I lost long ago. And she has nothing to lose, which makes her more dangerous to the Castellano family than they can imagine. Tomorrow, I finalize the will. Everything goes to her. The cabin, the land, and the secret beneath it all. God forgive me for what I'm about to do to her. But God help anyone who tries to take it from her. Sarah approached quietly, carrying 2 fresh cups of coffee. Jack told me what Adelaide did for him. The heart attack. She told me about it once, said it was the first time in 30 years she'd felt useful. Like maybe all that hiding had a purpose after all. Did you know her well? Margot asked. As well as anyone could. Sarah sat beside her. Adelaide would come to my store once a month. Always paid cash. Always bought the same things. Flour, coffee, batteries. Never lingered. But once, maybe 15 years ago, she stayed for a few extra minutes. I'd just found out my daughter had cancer. Adelaide saw me crying. She didn't say anything, just put her hand on mine, stayed with me until I stopped shaking. Then she left. 2 days later, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. $20,000 in cash. No note, just money. Margot looked up sharply. She helped you? Saved my daughter's life. Paid for treatments insurance wouldn't cover. I never knew for sure it was Adelaide, but who else could it be? Sarah smiled sadly. Your aunt spent 50 years hiding, but she was still watching, still caring, still trying to do good with blood money. The sun was rising by the time they returned to Jack's cabin. Riley woke up confused about where she was. Mama? We're safe, baby, Margot said, holding her close. We're going to be okay. As the group gathered around Jack's table, drinking coffee and eating Sarah's homemade breakfast, Sheriff Dawson laid out the plan. Noon today, Chen shows up at Adelaide's cabin. Margot, you meet him. You tell him you searched the place thoroughly, found nothing except old furniture and dust. Play it honest. You're a single mother who thought she'd inherited something valuable but got a shack instead. You're disappointed, but moving on. And when he doesn't believe me, he won't. But it plants doubt. He'll tear that cabin apart looking. He'll find nothing. Then he has a choice, escalate or retreat. If he escalates, we have him. Threats, trespassing, attempted theft. If he retreats, we've bought time to get the evidence to the right people. Either way, you win. Tom spoke up, his voice thoughtful. There's another angle we should consider. Marcus Castellano runs a legitimate construction business now, right? That means he has a reputation to protect. He can't afford a public scandal connecting him to organized crime from the 70s. If we threaten exposure, really threaten it, he might just walk away. Cut his losses. Jack nodded. That's the play. We show him we have Adelaide's records. We show him we're not afraid. And we give him a choice. Disappear quietly, or face federal investigation into how his grandfather's illegal fortune built his current empire. But that puts a target on all of you, Margot protested. If he thinks you're the ones with the evidence, which is why we move it off-site immediately, Dawson said. Tomorrow morning, Jack and I drive to Helena. We meet with an FBI agent I trust, a woman named Sarah Chen, no relation to Robert. She's been investigating the Castellano family's legitimate businesses for tax fraud. This evidence, it ties their current operations to historical, organized crime. She'll protect it. And us. What about Margot and Riley? Linda asked. They can't stay at Adelaide's cabin. Not safe. They stay with us, Dale said firmly. Our ranch is 40 miles from here. We've got security, dogs, a view of anyone approaching from miles away. And, he smiled grimly, I've got a gun collection that would make a militia nervous. At 11:45, Margot drove back to Adelaide's cabin. Sheriff Dawson followed in his patrol car, parking just out of sight down the road. Tom was positioned in the woods with a camera. They'd document everything. Her heart pounded as she parked, as she walked up the porch steps. Right on schedule, the black SUV appeared. Robert Chen stepped out, along with 3 other men. Larger men. Muscle. Margot met them on the porch, hands in her jacket pockets, trying to look casual despite her fear. Mr. Chen, have you reconsidered our generous offer? Chen asked smoothly. I've reconsidered everything, Margot said. I spent all night tearing this place apart. You know what I found? Nothing. Old dishes, moth-eaten blankets, some rusty tools. This cabin is worthless. Chen's smile faded. Miss Hayes, please don't insult my intelligence. I'm not. Margot met his eyes. I think you were chasing a legend. I think my great-aunt Adelaide was just a paranoid old woman who died alone in the mountains. If she ever had money, she spent it or buried it somewhere nobody will ever find. This cabin is empty. Chen stepped closer. Then you won't mind if we verify that. Actually, I do mind. This is private property. You have no warrant, no legal right to be here. Leave. Now. One of the large men moved forward, his hand reaching inside his coat. Chen, we should just stand down, Chen snapped. He studied Margot's face, looking for tells, for nervousness, for lies. But Margot had spent years being invisible, being overlooked. She knew how to hide in plain sight. You're making a mistake, Chen said quietly. I'm making a choice, Margot corrected. You offered $500,000 for something I don't have. I'd love that money. God knows I need it. But I can't give you what doesn't exist. Chen's expression turned cold. My employers are not patient men. They've waited 50 years for what belongs to them. Then they've waited long enough to know it's gone, Margot said. Adelaide took their money, and she's dead. Whatever she did with it, it died with her. We'll see about that. Chen turned to his men. Search the cabin. Margot pulled out her phone. Sheriff Dawson? They're trespassing. Within minutes, Sheriff Dawson pulled up, lights flashing. Behind him, Tom's truck. And behind that, Dale and Linda in their ranch vehicle. And then 3 more trucks appeared, carrying men and women from Frost Ridge. Jack had called everyone. The entire community had shown up. Dawson stepped out, hand resting on his service weapon. Step away from the property. You've been asked to leave. You're now trespassing. I can arrest you or you can go peacefully." Chen's men stopped at the cabin door, looking to their boss. Chen surveyed the gathering crowd, his jaw clenched. "This isn't over," he said. "Maybe not," Dawson agreed, "but it's over for today." Chen looked at Margot one last time. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually," Margot said quietly, "I do. I'm dealing with the grandson of a criminal who thinks his grandfather's stolen money makes him powerful. But you know what real power is. It's people willing to stand together. It's a community that protects its own, and it's having nothing left to lose." Chen climbed into the SUV. Before the door closed, Margot called out, "Oh, and Mr. Chen, tell Marcus Castellano that Adelaide kept very detailed records. Everything about Cascadia Holdings, everyone involved, every crime. And those records are in a very safe place. If anything happens to me or my daughter or anyone in this town, they go straight to the FBI." Chen froze. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Try me." The SUV pulled away, tires spinning in the snow. The crowd of locals remained until the vehicle disappeared down the mountain. Then, someone started clapping. Sarah. Others joined in. Soon, everyone was applauding, not for Margot's bravery, but for something bigger, for standing up, for refusing to be bullied, for proving that sometimes the smallest people in the quietest places can face down monsters. That night, at Dale and Linda's ranch, Margot sat with Riley on a couch in front of a roaring fire. The ranch house was warm, smelled like fresh bread and pine. Riley was half asleep, her head on her mother's lap. Jack sat across from them, Adelaide's journal open on his knees. "She knew this would happen," he said quietly. "She knew the Castellano family would come. That's why she documented everything, why she gave me copies. She was protecting you before you even knew you needed protecting." "I don't understand why she chose me," Margot whispered. "I'm nobody. I've never done anything important." Jack looked up. "You survived. You raised a beautiful daughter alone. You worked yourself half to death and never gave up. Adelaide saw herself in you, before Cascadia, before the fear. She saw who she could have been if life had been different, and she wanted to give you what she never had. A choice." Margot stroked Riley's hair. "What would you do? If you were me?" Jack was quiet for a long moment. "I'd do exactly what you're doing. I'd trust good people. I'd use Adelaide's evidence to protect yourself. And when the dust settles, when you're legally clear, I'd use that money to become the person Adelaide believed you could be. Someone who takes blood money and turns it into hope." The next morning, Jack and Sheriff Dawson left for Helena at dawn. They carried copies of Adelaide's documents in sealed evidence bags. Margot watched them drive away, her stomach tight with anxiety. Everything now depended on the FBI believing their story, on bureaucracy moving fast enough to protect them before Chen and the Castellanos made their next move. 3 days passed in tense quiet. Margot and Riley stayed at the ranch. Linda homeschooled Riley, teaching her about Montana history and mathematics. Dale showed Riley how to feed horses and collect eggs. The work was simple, grounding, but every car on the distant road made Margot's heart race. Every phone call might be news, good or bad. On the 4th day, Jack and Dawson returned. They looked exhausted but relieved. Jack sat at the kitchen table, while Linda poured coffee. "The FBI is very interested," he said. "Adelaide's records connect current Castellano operations to historical crimes. They're opening an investigation, full protection for Margot and Riley. Witness security if needed." "And the money?" Margot asked. "That's more complicated. They want it as evidence, but given the circumstances, the statute of limitations, Adelaide's death, your innocent inheritance, they think you'll be able to keep most of it. After taxes, after legal fees. But most of it." Dawson leaned forward. "There's more. Agent Chen, the FBI agent. She contacted Marcus Castellano directly. Told him, The investigation was active. He lawyered up immediately. And this morning, Robert Chen called the sheriff's office. The Castellano family is officially withdrawing all interest in the Frost Ridge property. They're done. Margot sat back, hardly daring to believe. It's over? Not completely. There'll be investigations, audits, paperwork. Could take months. But the immediate threat? Yes. It's over. They won't touch you now. Too much exposure. That night, Margot returned to Adelaide's cabin. She stood on the porch, looking out at the snow-covered forest. The moon was full, casting silver light across the clearing. She thought about Adelaide, living here alone for 48 years, carrying a secret that could have destroyed her, waiting for the right moment to pass it on. She thought about Margot Hayes from 3 weeks ago, the woman who could barely afford rent, who thought a $700 bank account was fortune enough. And she thought about who she was now. Someone with $260 million hidden in a Prohibition-era cellar. Someone with a community that had stood by her. Someone with choices she'd never dreamed possible. She pulled out her phone and opened a notes app. Started typing. Foundation ideas. Scholarships for single mothers. Medical bill assistance. Small business grants. Housing for families in crisis. Everything. Adelaide's money could have been used for, if Cascadia Holdings hadn't stolen it in the first place. She'd turn blood money into blessing, steal from thieves, and give to those who'd been robbed by life itself. Riley appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket. "Mama, can we stay here? In Adelaide's cabin?" Margot turned. "You want to?" Riley nodded. "It feels like home, like someone was waiting for us." Margot knelt and pulled her daughter close. "Yeah, baby, I think someone was." They stood together on the porch of the cabin that had changed everything, watching snow fall soft and silent through the pines. And for the first time in years, Margot Hayes felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. Not just for tomorrow, but for a future she could actually build. Adelaide had given her more than money. She'd given her possibility, and Margot wouldn't waste it. 6 months passed like water through fingers. Winter gave way to spring, and the Montana mountains transformed from frozen white to vibrant green. The cabin that had once been Adelaide's tomb became Margot's sanctuary. She and Riley moved in permanently, fixing what needed fixing, preserving what deserved preserving. The mismatched floorboards stayed exactly where they were. A reminder, a memorial. The FBI investigation moved slower than Margot had hoped, but faster than anyone expected. Agent Sarah Chen became not just an investigator but an ally. She understood what Adelaide had done, why she'd done it, and what Margot represented. An innocent inheritor thrust into a web of historical crime through no fault of her own. By April, the preliminary ruling came through. The money was legally Margot's, subject to estate taxes and a settlement with the federal government for Adelaide's original actions. The final amount, after everything, was staggering. $187,600,000. More money than Margot could spend in 10 lifetimes. More money than made any logical sense. And every single dollar carried the weight of Adelaide's 5-decade sacrifice. Margot sat in Jack's cabin the day the official paperwork arrived, the document that made her one of the wealthiest women in Montana. Riley played outside with Jack's golden retriever. Spring sunshine poured through the windows. Jack poured 2 glasses of whiskey, slid one across the table. "To Adelaide," he said simply. "To Adelaide," Margot echoed. They drank in silence. Then, Jack asked the question Margot had been asking herself for months. "What now?" Margot pulled out a worn notebook, its pages filled with her handwriting. Lists, ideas, calculations, dreams. "I've been thinking about something Adelaide wrote in her journal. She said the money was cursed because it came from evil. But curses can be broken. Evil can be transformed into good. You just need someone brave enough to do the work." Jack smiled. "Sounds like you've got a plan." Margot opened the notebook. "I want to start a foundation. The Adelaide Morgan Legacy Foundation. Its mission would be simple: help people who are where I was 6 months ago. Single mothers working 3 jobs, families drowning in medical debt, kids who can't afford college, small businesses that just need one break, people the system has forgotten. That'll take more than money, Jack observed. It'll take infrastructure, staff, legal work. I know. Margot's voice was steady. That's why I've been meeting with lawyers, accountants, foundation experts. I've been learning. She smiled. Turns out when you have $187 million, people take your calls. Over the next 3 months, Margot built something unprecedented. She hired a team, not corporate sharks, but people who understood struggle. Sarah from the general store became the foundation's director of community outreach. Tom from search and rescue headed emergency assistance programs. Sheriff Dawson joined the board, bringing credibility and local knowledge. And Jack, despite his protests that he was too old, became chief advisor. The foundation's first office opened in Silver Creek in July, a renovated building on Main Street that had sat empty for 15 years. Margot insisted on doing much of the renovation work herself, painting walls, installing shelves, her hands once again covered in paint instead of grease, but working just as hard. Riley helped, 7 years old and already understanding that privilege meant responsibility. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew 200 people. Margot stood on the steps of the foundation office, Riley at her side, and spoke without notes. 6 months ago, I inherited a cabin and discovered a fortune. But what I really inherited was a choice. I could hide that money, protect it, let it sit in banks collecting interest while people around me struggled. Or I could do what my great-aunt Adelaide couldn't do in her lifetime. I could use it to heal instead of harm. She gestured to the building behind her. This foundation exists because one woman spent 50 years protecting money she believed could someday do good. And because a community stood by a stranger when powerful people tried to take that money by force. Everything we do here honors both of those truths. We help people because we can, and because we've all needed help at some point. The first grants went out in August. $50,000 to a single mother in Silver Creek, whose daughter needed surgery insurance wouldn't cover. $20,000 to a veteran trying to start a furniture business. $15,000 to pay off medical debt for a family who'd lost everything when their son was diagnosed with leukemia. $10,000 for college tuition for a girl who'd aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. The applications poured in, hundreds of them. Stories that broke Margot's heart and reminded her why this work mattered. Each one she read personally. Each one she considered carefully. And each time she signed a check, she thought of Adelaide. This is what you waited for. This is what it was all for. But Margot didn't just give money away. She gave time, attention, care. She met with recipients, learned their stories, helped them plan for futures beyond crisis. She hired counselors, job coaches, financial advisors. The foundation didn't just hand out cash. It built pathways out of poverty, out of desperation, out of the kind of hopelessness Margot remembered too well. By October, the foundation had distributed $12 million to over 300 families. The impact rippled through the region. Businesses reopened, medical debts vanished, kids went to college, and slowly, quietly, a forgotten corner of Montana began to believe in second chances again. But Margot's transformation wasn't just about the money. It was about who she became in the process. The woman who'd arrived in Frost Ridge 6 months ago, scared and desperate, barely surviving, that woman was gone. In her place stood someone Margot barely recognized in the mirror, confident, purposeful, strong. She started speaking at events, sharing Adelaide's story and her own. She testified before state committees about poverty, about the gaps in social services, about how easily people fell through cracks. She used her platform, her wealth, her voice. And people listened, Not because she was rich, but because she understood. She'd been there. She knew what it meant to choose between rent and food, to work until your body gave out, to wonder if your child deserved better than you could give. Riley transformed too. She thrived in their small mountain school, made friends, joined the soccer team, but more than that, she absorbed the lessons of their new life. That wealth meant responsibility. That privilege was meant to be shared. That one person could make a difference if they were brave enough to try. One Saturday in November, Riley came to Margot with an idea. "Mama, I want to do something with my allowance. The foundation. Can kids donate too?" Margot knelt to her daughter's level. "Of course. What are you thinking? There's a girl in my class. Her family lost their house in a fire. She doesn't have any toys or books. Can we help her?" Tears stung Margot's eyes. "Yeah, baby. We absolutely can." They delivered toys and books that week. But Margot also quietly paid for the family's temporary housing and helped them find a new home. When Riley thanked her, Margot shook her head. "You're the one who saw the need. You're the one who cared enough to do something. That's the important part." The first anniversary of Adelaide's death arrived in early November. Margot organized a memorial service at the cabin. The entire community came. Jack spoke about Adelaide's courage. Sarah shared stories of her quiet generosity. Sheriff Dawson talked about integrity and sacrifice. And Margot, standing where Adelaide had stood for nearly 50 years, read from her great-aunt's journal. "I lived in fear for so long," Adelaide had written. "Fear of being discovered. Fear of losing everything. Fear of dying alone with my secrets. But near the end, I realized something. The money was never the point. The point was believing that goodness could survive evil, that light could outlast darkness, that one person's choice, made bravely and held faithfully, could change everything. I chose to hide the money because I believed it could be redeemed. And I chose Margot because I believe she's the one who can do it." The crowd was silent. Margot looked out at the faces. People who'd become family. "This past year has taught me something I never understood before. Wealth isn't about having money. It's about having purpose. Adelaide gave me both. And every day, I try to honor that gift by giving others what she gave me. A chance. Hope. The belief that tomorrow can be better than today." That night, after everyone left, Margot and Riley sat on the cabin's porch. The first snow of the season was falling, soft and silent. Riley leaned against her mother. "Do you think Adelaide would be proud of us?" Margot wrapped her arm around her daughter. "I think she's been proud of us from the beginning. Not because of the foundation or the money, but because we didn't give up. When things got scary, when bad people came, when we didn't know what to do, we kept going. That's what she did for 50 years. She kept going. And she trusted we'd do the same." "I miss her," Riley said quietly, "even though I never met her." "Me too, baby. Me too." By December, the foundation's reach extended beyond Montana. News organizations picked up the story. Not the sensational version, wealthy heiress distributes fortune, but the real story. Woman transforms stolen money into healing. Communities rebuild with help from unlikely source. Single mother honors great-aunt's legacy by creating pathways out of poverty. Margot did interviews sparingly. She wasn't interested in fame, but she understood that visibility brought credibility, that publicity encouraged other wealthy people to give, that her story could inspire others. So she spoke, and people listened. A reporter from the New York Times came in January. She spent 3 days in Frost Ridge interviewing Margot, the foundation staff, grant recipients. The resulting article was 8,000 words, a deep dive into Adelaide's history, Margot's inheritance, and the foundation's impact. It ran with a photo of Margot and Riley standing in front of the cabin, snow falling around them, both smiling. The headline read, "From Stolen Fortune to Second Chances, How One Woman is Rewriting Her Family's Legacy." The article went viral. Donations poured in from across the country. People who'd never heard of Frost Ridge sent checks, offered volunteer hours, shared the story. Within weeks, the foundation's reach doubled. Margot hired more staff, opened satellite offices, expanded programs. What had started as one woman's attempt to honor her great-aunt became a movement. But through it all, Margot stayed grounded. She still lived in the cabin, still drove the same battered truck, still painted her own walls and fixed her own leaks. Riley still attended the local school. They still ate dinner at Jack's house twice a week. The money changed their circumstances, but Margot refused to let it change who they were. In March, 18 months after finding the fortune, Margot sat in the foundation office reviewing applications. One caught her eye. A woman from Seattle, 32 years old, single mother of 2, working 3 jobs and still facing eviction. Her name was Jessica. Her story was Margot's story. Margot picked up the phone and called her directly. "Jessica, this is Margot Hayes from the Adelaide Morgan Legacy Foundation." A pause, then a shaky voice. "Is this real?" "I applied, but I didn't think. There are so many people who need help. Your application moved me," Margot said gently. "I want to help. We're going to pay your rent for the next year. We're going to help you find better employment. We're going to provide childcare support. And we're going to make sure you and your kids are okay. Does that sound good?" Jessica started crying. I can't. Thank you. Thank you so much." Margot felt her own throat tighten. "You don't have to thank me. Just promise me something. When you're stable, when things are better, you'll remember this feeling. And someday, when you can, you'll help someone else who's where you are now." "I promise," Jessica whispered. That call reminded Margot why she was doing this. Not for recognition or legacy, or even to honor Adelaide, though those things mattered. She did it because she remembered. She remembered the terror of an eviction notice, the shame of paying for groceries with coins, the exhaustion of working until you couldn't stand, the fear that your child would grow up knowing only struggle. And she refused to let others suffer that way when she had the power to stop it. By summer, the foundation had helped over 2,000 families. The impact was measurable, not just in dollars but in lives transformed. Businesses thriving, kids graduating, medical crises averted, families staying together instead of being torn apart by poverty. Each success felt like a small redemption of Adelaide's choice 50 years ago. But Margot knew the work would never be done. Poverty was endless. Need was infinite. The foundation could help thousands and still miss millions. Some nights, that reality crushed her. She'd lie awake, thinking about all the people they couldn't reach, all the applications they had to deny, all the suffering that continued despite their best efforts. Jack found her one night sitting on the cabin steps, head in her hands. "You can't save everyone," he said gently, sitting beside her. "I know, but I have to try. You are trying, and you're succeeding more than you realize." He gestured toward the valley below, where lights from the town twinkled. 2 years ago, Silver Creek was dying. Half the businesses were closed. Kids were leaving because there was no future here. Now, we've got new shops opening, families moving in. Hope. That's because of you, because of what you built, because of what Adelaide built, Margot corrected. "No." Jack shook his head. "Adelaide hid the money. You transformed it. There's a difference. She kept it safe, but you made it mean something." Margot looked at the stars spread across the vast Montana sky. "Sometimes I wonder what she'd think of all this. If she'd approve of the choices I've made." Jack smiled. "She chose you for a reason. She knew exactly what she was doing." As Riley's 8th birthday approached, Margot organized something special. A celebration not just for Riley, but for everyone the foundation had helped. They rented the community center in Silver Creek, invited every grant recipient within driving distance. Over 500 people came. The room buzzed with life. Families laughing, kids playing, People sharing stories of how a check had arrived at exactly the right moment, how a phone call had changed everything, how hope had returned when they'd thought it was gone forever. Margot moved through the crowd, hugging people she'd only known through applications, meeting children whose futures she'd helped secure. One moment in particular stayed with her. An elderly man approached, tears streaming down his weathered face. He took Margot's hands in his calloused ones. "My granddaughter," he said, voice breaking. "She's going to be a doctor. Because of you. Because of this foundation. She gets to go to medical school. She's the first person in our family to go to college. The first." He pulled out a photo. A young woman in a white coat, beaming with pride. "This is because you believed in her when no one else did." Margot looked at the photo, at the hope captured in that young woman's smile, and felt something shift inside her. This was why Adelaide had waited. This was why she'd endured 50 years of isolation and fear, not for the money itself, but for this exact moment, for this grandfather's tears, for this young woman's future, for proof that stolen wealth could be purified through love. She hugged the old man tightly. "Tell her to save lives," Margot whispered. "Tell her Adelaide would be proud." Riley stood in the center of it all, surrounded by kids her age, all of them beneficiaries of the foundation in one way or another. They played games and ate cake and acted like normal children, unaware that every single one of them had nearly been crushed by circumstances beyond their control, that they'd been saved by one woman's hidden fortune and another woman's determination to use it right. Near the end of the evening, Margot stepped onto a small stage. The room quieted. She looked out at the faces. So many lives intersecting in this moment. 2 years ago, I was you, working too hard for too little, scared, desperate, barely holding on. I know what it's like to feel invisible, to feel like the world has forgotten you exist, and I know what it's like to receive help when you need it most. She paused, emotions threatening to overwhelm her. My great-aunt Adelaide spent 50 years protecting a fortune because she believed it could heal. She was right, but not because money is magic, because people are. Because when we choose to help each other, when we refuse to look away from suffering, when we say someone else's struggle matters as much as our own, that's when real transformation happens. The room erupted in applause, but Margot held up her hand. "I'm not the hero of this story. You are. Every person who's taken help and used it to rebuild. Every family that stayed together because rent got paid. Every kid who'll go to college because someone believed they deserved a chance. You're the proof that Adelaide's sacrifice meant something, that stolen money can be redeemed, that one person's courage can ripple through generations." After the celebration, long after everyone had gone home, Margot sat in the cabin with Adelaide's journal open on her lap. She'd read it cover to cover dozens of times, but tonight she turned to the final page. Adelaide's last entry, written days before she died. "My time is ending. The pain is too much now, but I'm not afraid. I'm ready. I've done what I set out to do. The money is safe. The records are preserved. And Margot, my brave, beautiful great niece, will inherit everything. I wish I could see what she builds, but I think I already know. She'll build hope, she'll build healing, and she'll prove what I always believed, that even the darkest evil can't extinguish the light if someone is willing to carry it forward." Margot closed the journal and looked around the cabin. At the stone fireplace, where she'd first warmed herself. At the floorboards that had hidden impossible secrets. At the walls that had sheltered Adelaide's lonely decades and now cradled her own family's laughter. This place had been a tomb. Now it was a home. The money had been cursed. Now it was blessing. And Adelaide's isolation had transformed into Margot's connection to thousands of lives across the country. The transformation wasn't just about circumstances, it was about identity. Margot Hayes, the invisible single mother barely surviving, no longer existed. In her place was Margot Hayes, founder of a foundation, voice for the forgotten, proof that one person could change everything. She'd rebuilt not just her life, but herself, found strength she didn't know she had, discovered purpose that felt larger than breathing, became the woman Adelaide had believed she could be. Riley appeared in her pajamas, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Mama, are you coming to bed?" "Soon, baby. Just thinking." "About what?" "About how far we've come. About how different everything is now." Riley climbed into her lap, something she was almost too big for now. "Do you miss how it was before? When it was just us, and we didn't have all this?" Margot thought about their old apartment. The stress, the fear, the nights she'd cried silently so Riley wouldn't hear. "No," she said honestly, "I don't miss that, but I remember it, and I'll never forget what it felt like." That's important. Why? Because forgetting means you stop caring, and caring is what makes this. She gestured around the cabin, around the life they'd built. All of this means something. The seasons turned again. The foundation grew. More offices opened across Montana, then Idaho, then Wyoming. Other wealthy individuals reached out, inspired by Margot's example, wanting to start similar programs. She advised them freely, shared what she'd learned, encouraged them to think beyond charity to transformation. The movement expanded beyond anything Adelaide could have imagined. But Frost Ridge remained home. The cabin remained sanctuary. And every decision Margot made, every grant she approved, every family she helped, she filtered through one question: would Adelaide be proud of this choice? The answer was always yes. On a crisp autumn morning, 3 years after inheriting the cabin, Margot received a letter that made her hands shake. It was from Marcus Castellano himself. Brief, handwritten, unexpected. "Miss Hayes," it read, "I've watched what you've done with money my grandfather believed belonged to him. For years, I was angry, felt robbed, but I've come to understand something. That fortune was built on suffering. It came from people my grandfather hurt, businesses he destroyed, lives he ruined. What you've done, turning it into healing, that's justice. Real justice. Not the kind courts deliver, but the kind that actually repairs what was broken. My grandfather died angry and alone. Adelaide died knowing she'd protected something good. And you've proven she was right. I won't bother you again. This is my official withdrawal of any claim. Use the money well. You already are." Margot read the letter twice, then showed it to Jack. "It's over," she whispered. "Really over." Jack nodded slowly. Adelaide would say, "It's just beginning." And he was right, because the foundation wasn't an ending. It was a continuation of Adelaide's belief that one person could make a difference. That money was only as good or evil as the hands that held it. That transformation was always possible if someone was brave enough to try. Anyone can stumble into fortune, but it takes someone extraordinary to transform that fortune into purpose, to look at stolen money and see possibility instead of poison, to inherit a burden and turn it into blessing. Margot Hayes did more than spend Adelaide's hidden wealth. She redeemed it. She proved that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being terrified and choosing to act anyway. It's about standing up when powerful people try to knock you down. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. And it's about believing, even in the darkest moments, that tomorrow can be brighter than today. As twilight settled over the Montana mountains, Margot stood on the cabin porch, with Riley at her side. The same porch where Adelaide had stood alone for decades. The same view of endless trees and distant peaks. But everything was different now. The isolation had become community. The silence had become laughter. The fear had become hope. And the fortune hidden beneath floorboards had become thousands of futures rebuilt, families saved, dreams made possible. The woman who'd inherited a frozen cabin in the woods hadn't just found $260 million, she'd found herself. found her strength, found her purpose. And in doing so, she'd proven what Adelaide had known all along, that sometimes the greatest inheritances aren't measured in money, but in the courage to use what you're given to build something that matters. Because for Margot Hayes, and for every person she helped, wealth was never the destination. It was simply the beginning of everything that came after. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories waiting for you. Click 2. Keep discovering stories that prove ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe one person can change the world. Retry.